Welcome. This is the first seminar hosted at Worksman's Attorneys as the current incumbent chair of the Nedbank JILB initiative. It's an amazing initiative that's been running for a few years, and it's grown from strength to strength, and we have a database of, I think on last count, over 700 junior counsel who've showed an interest in the initiative. So very excited to present today and to moderate an interesting panel. So a little bit about myself firstly, and then I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to tell you about the context of the topic and the approach that we're taking today, given that this is a room full of young lawyers, advocates, attorneys, and so the idea was to give you a flavor for the world of cybercrimes from a number of different perspectives. So my name is Preeta Bagaji, and I'm a director at Worksman's Attorneys. I head up the firm's technology and innovation practice. So what I do day in and day out is practice technology law. I'm a commercial lawyer, but a lot of that also involves dealing with data and cybersecurity. And so part and parcel of a lot of what I do is work on when things go wrong. So both looking at when things go wrong, and then once we know when things go wrong and how they go wrong, we can actually advise on and predict and hopefully also help prevent or mitigate these sorts of crises from happening. So I work quite closely with some of the panel members here, and we often have very engaging discussions looking at the topic from different perspectives. So to my right is Taiba Suleiman, who's a partner at CDH. Would you like to go ahead?
I nearly said good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Taiba Suleiman. I head up the technology and communication sector at Cliff Hofmeyer. I do some of the similar things that Preeta does in her practice, but I am, I'm sure she is as well. We're passionate about all things technology. We're passionate about the sort of changes on the horizon in terms of AI and quantum computing. Passionate about the way that that's going to assist our profession, and perhaps we have to consider the way that it's going to inhibit our profession going forward. So lovely to be here, and thanks for having me.
Great. Jacques.
Good afternoon. I'm Jacques Lawrence. I'm the Nedbank Group Chief Information Security Officer. So I guess all things cyber is what I'm involved in a daily basis. And for my sins, I also head up the cyber crisis team when we have any sort of major cyber incidents in the bank. But the cyber spectrum in the bank is quite broad, from the risk side as well as then obviously to the technical side of making sure we keep all the baddies out of the bank systems and that our clients can securely transact. So yeah, thanks for having me here and looking forward to the evening.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Gobetz. I'm a partner here at Worksman's. I'm in the litigation department, but I'm also in two sub-areas, practice areas, one of which is in Preeta's area, which is the all things technical. She adopted me once upon a time because I'm one of the hybrid things that actually understand technology and law, which is not often something that happens, as my panelists will tell you. So I'm in Preeta's team from that point of view, but I do more of the reactive than the proactive, and I am one of the things we specialize in my team is cyber crisis breach management for the clients, and also dealing with cyber crimes. I'm also in the business crimes and investigations team here at Worksman's, and we've done a lot of high-level reactionary and proactive investigations for clients in the country in various areas, VBS, PROSA, and a few others, from time to time. But my passion is in the tech space, which is why I enjoy it so much with Preeta.
Thank you. My name is Tsepo Moliko. I'm an executive at ENS's forensic division, but I head up the cybercrime practice, the digital forensics practice. I'm a real techie. I've been doing this for about 20 years, investigating cybercrime specifically, from when it started as someone stealing information now and then when they leave the company, to the more complex syndicates and other cybercrimes, ransomware and email compromises. So that's what I do on a daily basis. Very interesting job because we're really on the ground trying to chase the criminals.
Yes, Jacques Milan from Fax Consulting. Started my company as an information security and forensic investigation entity beginning of 2000. And yes, we specialize also in ransomware investigations, incident handling, and computer forensics. We are very good at data mining, because when you investigate incidents, you end up with a huge amount of data. So we are also a company of only technical people. So that is our culture. We enjoy unraveling the puzzles. So fascinating work we do, but it aligns very nicely with the legal component. It's becoming more and more important to align the two going forward.
Great, thank you everyone, and it's a real pleasure to host you here today. Right, so what does a lawyer look at when looking at cybercrime? So I know that, and it's often the case, the room is filled with people that know a lot about how cybercrimes work, and those that are starting to get their heads around it. But I think it's undoubtedly the case that all of us are acutely aware of cyber risks being proliferated across all aspects of our lives. And so definitely the risks for our clients, corporates, and interactions in the business space is increasing. So I read a statistic that comes from the end of last year that in 2024, the number of ransomware incidences that were reported in South Africa were close to 18,000. And that's by far one of the biggest types of cyber attacks, but by no means the only type. There are so many other types of incidents. And so I think it's always useful when looking at these incidents to understand what is going on, what has happened, and what kind of attack has taken place. So I'm going to actually hand over to Jacques Milan to give us that 101 of what is a cyber attack, how does it happen, how do criminals think, and how do they approach it, what happens when a cyber attack occurs.
Yes, thank you, Brita. So actually, the cyber criminals have become very sophisticated in finding information about people's personal spaces, if I can call it that, in organizations, and footprinting them, if we can call it that, before they even come close to attacking a system or a network. So in other words, they leverage the fact that most people's work and private life are very commingled. So, if I'm interested in knowing what's happening in Worksmans, for example, I would start profiling the directors of Worksmans. And where I would find that information is looking in the dark web. So I would find information about leaked passwords. For example, if I've used my Worksman's email address for Facebook or LinkedIn or anything like that, those passwords are often harvested or breached, and they end up in the dark web. And this happens constantly. There's recently been a Google hack, 1.5 billion passwords, right? That's out there. In other words, I can start profiling people, how they choose passwords, and effectively I can use that to start figuring out how to get into your private email, into who you are. And this all happens before any alerts or anything that you would be aware of would take place. So in other words, there are teams now literally profiling organizations based on what kind of footprint they have economically, and also from a client perspective, and then they go after them. And it starts there. There's a lot of information out there, And then obviously from there on in, ironically enough, it's usually something like one would think it would be a very sophisticated hack and firewall and break into a network. It's not like that. Most of the time, it's something really mundane in many cases, like a remote administration portal or a VPN that wasn't configured properly, but because I know the email addresses and passwords for people, I can get in. Two-factor authentication wasn't set up, something basic like that. Or on the other side, phishing. Phishing is the other one that we've all seen. Social engineering, where you receive a PDF, a malicious PDF, and you think it comes from somebody you know. And remember, we always say that if I've profiled somebody, everybody can be phished. Because if I've been in your private email, and I've been in some of your emails relating to your work, I know what you would deem to be legitimate. So it's very easy then to send you something that you would click on and then effectively could cause a ransomware attack in your organization or could open a back door for hackers to come in. It's become a business now. So this is now, it's not just hackers that figure things out. I can buy these tools on websites. And they're not that expensive. I don't even need to have the technical skill myself. I can buy it from hackers that have turned it into a commercial business now and use it to attack third parties. So that's unfortunately where we are now. It's become a commercial and economic business now.
Great. I'm going to move on to Jacques Lawrence. From the bank's perspective and in the banking industry, what are you seeing in terms of cyber criminals activity, and where is the focus been from your perspective?
So interesting enough, I mean, we've got the two angles. Obviously, the bank itself, and how people try and attack the bank, and that is pretty much as Jacques explained. The most predominant thing is phishing emails. I always say, why would you try and break through a wall if you can just jump over the wall? Because that's what phishing ultimately can take you a lot of work to try and get through the wall, but to just sort of jump over. That's what criminals ideally try and do. So there's a lot of work being done to sort of keep all of those malicious emails out of the organizations. But what we see from a banking industry, if you look at more at the client side, social engineering is the most common, and it's actually not only phishing, it's actually the vishing. Which is where the voice calls where they threaten clients that you've had there's a fraud on your account and you've got to click on this to activate this payment, etc. That's the most predominant thing. And interesting enough as well is that you'll sort of tend to find one bank, they'll find some loophole in the bank. The bank will close that, then they move to the next bank, then they find something there, and it's sort of, so you can never say we fixed something and now it's sort of sorted. And if you look at they're also very specifically targeting the elderly, who are less technically knowledgeable, to try and to threaten them to easily give away passwords, give away credentials, and sometimes do activities that somebody else, a younger that is more technologically savvy may actually challenge. So yes, definitely the onslaught is there on a daily basis. And in the industry, the figures, we belong to a body called Sabric, all of the banks, and we get all the fraud industry information from there, and definitely the fraudsters are very active. There's also a recent publication that mentioned in Africa that Africa is one of the most or continents with the highest cyber crime, and in Africa the three top countries. Now you must help me out. I know it's South Africa and Kenya, but there's a third one. Is it Nigeria?
Yeah, it's Nigeria.
I think we just all assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely South Africa, unfortunately, is one of the countries experiencing the most cybercrime.
Okay. Maybe Seppo, from your perspective, in terms of how cyber criminals are thinking, what are you seeing, or what experience have you unfolded in recent while? Anything new and interesting, or is it the same modus operandi?
No, it's the same. We're seeing the same things. What we are seeing is a lot of organizations are not necessarily prepared for cybercrime, even though it's been probably top 3 risks in the last couple of years and top 5 in over 10 years. But organizations are just not prepared. having heard what Jacques has said now, Jacques on my right, has said now, your data is out there, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or company websites. And having heard what the Jacques on my left has said now about what cyber criminals are doing, they're not necessarily breaking through the wall. It's data that's current, and they're using that data to break into organizations, phishing attacks, business email compromise, study the business, how data flows in the business, and they compromise additional people. So we are sort of seeing the same thing.
Okay, and so with that, how do you respond? So maybe Jacques Lawrence, if you'd like to sort of illustrate that situation room. It's happened. What then? Yeah. Don't panic is the first thing, but what happens?
I guess before it happens, there's a lot that we try and do to actually for it not to happen. I think banks are highly regulated, so there's a lot of onus on us to implement a lot of security controls, to test our systems. So we do a lot of things even called red teaming, where we get external ethical hackers to try and break into the bank, etc. So we constantly test our systems, constantly evolve the technologies that we use and how we protect the clients. But when you do have an incident, it varies in nature. We've got minor incidents, which sometimes just a small privacy incident where you've got to assess do you have to inform the regulator? What are the steps that you need to do? We've got not often, but it happens that some of our third parties that we deal with have data breaches, and then you've always got to first assess does that data breach impact any of our data that they work with, etc. So it's getting all the right people in the organization quickly together to look into these situations. When you do have a major breach, we have got what we call the cyber crisis management team, which I head up. If we have any material incident, then we'll get that team together, and then other Jacques will probably tell you. Then, chaos is one of the words that is part of that. Obviously, first efforts are always to try and stop the bleed, or to at least close any technical gaps or risks that you have, to try and make sure that nothing happens further. And then, then it is, I guess, analysis paralysis. And then, depending on the nature of the incident, as soon as it is a client-facing or it impacts any of our clients, and you've got duties in terms of the POPI Act, etc., then there's a lot of processes that kick in, with informing regulators, with working with, if necessary, external companies if you don't have the internal skills to assist with investigations, forensic analysis, etc. And then there's processes where we've got a duty towards our clients, and obviously a bank has got different segments. You've got retail clients, you've got business clients, and all of them deal in different channels of communication that you've then got to deal with, how you will reach out to your different levels of clients. And then the other difficult bit is normally preparing for the media, making sure that you have got your holding statements, you are prepared if there's interviews with the organization regarding any incident, etc. So there's a lot of work that goes on. We also do simulations where we actually practice some of these incidents, and there's also industry-wide sometimes simulations like this taking place, where the intent is also to test how you would respond as an organization and test your processes, but then also as an industry, are there certain things that you may need to as an industry address? And we've seen that in South Africa with the likes of the Experian data breach, etc., where industry as the banks come together, we actually work with the third party. There's a lot of moving parts.
So I do want to go to Jacques Milan, following on from that. And are you seeing that people are more prepared, or businesses more prepared? Because Jacques Lawrence is very cool and calm, and has a lot of processes clearly in place. What do you see generally?
Yeah, look, that sounds like the gold standard that I'm hearing there, and unfortunately not the norm. I think many times companies take more than 7 months to a year to realize that they have even been breached. Yeah. So by then most of your data is out, it's exfiltrated, and you just by chance somebody notices something and then realizes there's a problem. So it's unfortunately the reality that this people don't take it as seriously as they should, especially with the fact that actually in reality, it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when, right? It's going to happen. Right? It's going to happen. If it's connected to the internet, it's going to happen. Secondly, are you going to know about it? And the banks are very good with putting in effort to detecting that it actually happened. Whereas in organizations, I find they put an antivirus down and they think, okay, we're good, right? It's going to remove stuff that doesn't belong there. But actually, from a black hat or a hacker perspective, those types of things are just a hindrance to get where they want to get to. So it's very important to detect it, and then of course, as Jacques said, the reaction process. There has to be a methodology. What we see a lot in companies is that they only start thinking about what to do when it's already happened, and then it's beyond chaos, because then they do have a semi-plan, but it doesn't speak to what do we actually do? Yeah. What do we do in the infrastructure? What don't we do? Don't put off service. Do we put on? Leave the service on. What do we actually? Who do we phone? What do we do? So it's unfortunately the reality of it. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot to you, Jeremy. I know you have a lot of war stories to share, but maybe just a few do's and don'ts from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, just to add on to what Jacques and the guys are saying, is that obviously the banks have more responsibilities and their systems are a lot more vigorous, and their posture is at a level that is a lot stronger than what you would see in normal business. But the one thing you got to see, and what I've been seeing in my practice with the reactionary stuff and the crisis management, is that you'd be shocked at some of the very big businesses out there at how poor their security posture is. One of the big things you got to understand is that IT is a support department, like a lot of other things, and you got to invest in your posture to make it adequate to address what's going on out there. And unfortunately, the businesses don't see that yet. There are guys that are pivoting that way, particularly the tech guys that we represent, but the general businessmen who would rather invest in other parts of the operations, they are failing they want to put the minimum into the security costs and the posture, when there is an ability you don't need to have the gold standard like the banks have. You can spend a bit of money to put in, there's even off-the-shelf programs and software and all of that can be implemented in your systems that can actually prevent in the long run. And it's it's one of those issues where it's like a short-term versus a long-term benefit. Short-term, yes, they're saving on the balance sheet. Long-term, they're going to be paying my fees, to come and fix the issue that should have been fixed. And then also they got issues with the regulator because their posture wasn't adequate enough to meet their standard. And it's a thing that we're trying to change on the reactive side with Preta, is trying to get more clients aware and that's not fees for us, because it's about engaging the right technical expertise and the right people to come in and make sure your business is secure, so that it costs you less in the long run. And there's a big apprehension, specifically in the businesses that aren't tech related, to spend that money. And that's where the problem comes, and when we have to come in. But I mean, there's been incredible. I mean, we had 2 crisis breach management issues recently where we get deployed. The clients colloquially call me the panic button, where you have a situation where it's a bug that sits, and you got to understand that it's also not about your posture; it's about the other party's posture, people you engaging with on a daily basis, because they may be the infected party. And these bugs are very good and very advanced, and they're continuously finding ways to get around your security. And like Jacques said, they sit there unknown to you. They learn your system, they learn your update patterns, they learn everything. They only make themselves known when they believe they're in a position to hamstring you, where you will be at your weakest and succumb easily to a ransom demand. And that's what we're seeing in our experience. But from a practical point of view, because again, like the law is very clear, obviously. Like you don't want to aid and abet, but paying ransom under duress it's not illegal, but you do need to report it. You need to deal with it. But again, we've seen that the guys that pay the ransoms, because our house view and what we've advised clients is not to pay. Because a lot of the time, once you pay, there's no guarantee they're going to do what they want. Once something's on the internet, it's on the internet. You know, it's sitting there, regardless. There's no guarantee, one, that they're going to comply. And a lot of the time we see they come for repeat business because they know you paid the first time. You give the finger, they're coming for the hand. And you're not dealing with ethical people. I mean, there are guys there. I'm in the middle of a matter, the one where our client was the victim, but they never paid the ransom. We were able to assist them. Where there is a literal, there's an FBI task force engaged now in looking into it. It's a syndicate called Medusa, a ransomware syndicate, and they are. If you go into their chat room, it's actually scary. You are negotiating against AI, and they have a business. It's a business for them. You sit there, and they are negotiating up and down on ransom demands. And again, the most interesting thing, and it's why we tell clients not to pay the demand, is that these guys, they don't care when they encrypt your data. They're not trying to protect your data. So even if you get your key to unencrypt it and get your data back, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to use the data. 90% of the time you can't use it. It's useless because of the encryption and what they've done to it. And again, also one of the mistakes that clients make when that immediate fight or flight reaction comes in, which is why Jacques' comment about it's important to have a proper policy in place on how to react. But what happens is that the clients go and they just turn off everything. It's the worst thing you can do. You need to actually just sever the tie with the internet. Okay, you make sure that there's no longer a tie to the internet so that the systems are open, because that makes it easier for guys that are on the technical side that come to help to recover as much data as possible. Because once it's off, it's like what do the odds go down once they turn it off?
Close to zero.
Yeah. So and already it's about having proper backup protocols. It's about advising the clients having proper training, proper ways in which you have an adequate security posture, because your legal obligation is that. You know, the bank obviously has a higher obligation, but from businesses and your clients as a whole, you have a duty to have an adequate standard that could be reasonably expected of you as a person in control of that particular data, for the regulators and also from a negligence point of view.
Jacques Milan, you want to add something from your experience? Have you seen repeat offenders?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So typically, more than 70% of the time, if you pay the ransom, then you end up getting a return visit. And what we also see is that the company often don't put in the effort to do remediation. They don't understand how these guys got in and whether they left anything behind, because this is what they do. They're going to leave as many backdoors and things there so that they have another way to get in afterwards. And I mean, the example recently that we've seen is where they've been on a network for months to basically start encrypting the cloud backups of the organization as well. So that by the time the incident happened, the IT guy says, don't worry, it's all good, we've got backups. And then they restore the backups, and that's also encrypted. So they literally have infiltrated the network and gone through the processes of understanding how everything fits together, and spent their time figuring out how to make sure that when the final servers go down, then they actually know that they have a good chance of recovery. Last thing I just want to say is that this data ends up on the dark web eventually. There are Telegram groups and dark web sites where the data is brokered for money. They first try and extort the client for millions of dollars, typically, depending on the size of the organization. And then secondly, and that's also why we say don't pay it, because worst case scenario, you can go and get the data from a broker for a fraction of the price if you really want to buy your data back, right? So it's and as Jeremy said, often these encryption processes break the files. So they give you the key, they say fine, yeah, but most of the data is not usable. So then you've paid a huge amount of money for something that's useless to you. So that's just part of the process.
Well, one thing I just want to say, I need to go. I remember a point. Jacques gave an example earlier about worksmans that I need to say it for the sake of one, our insurance policy, and two, so you don't doubt our capabilities. That isn't allowed. We don't utilize worksman's addresses for giving multiple passwords and that. We have to make sure there's a system here where it's blocked, and we utilize multiple different passwords over time, and it has to change every few weeks.
Yeah, and
just in case.
And as a courtesy, I do check actually.
Yeah, Jacques does our penetration testing.
Thank you, Jacques. I just
Well-
want to come back to the legalese with ransom payments. So, some companies, many companies, clearly it's a big business worldwide, do pay ransom. So, from a South African law perspective, Jeremy, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the legalities.
Yeah, so I mean the legalities of it is that you're being made to pay under duress, and it's not unlawful. Okay, but the thing is that if you do not report it to the police and address it, you will be guilty of an offence. Because then it becomes, first of all, you haven't reported this extortion, which is both a PRECA offence and a Cybercrimes Act offence. And then also you're in a situation where you could be seen as aiding and abetting, or someone within the organisation is aiding and abetting. But you have an immediate, for you to not be guilty of an offence, once that ransom is paid, you need to report it to the authorities. And obviously you need to do the normal data breach protocols and everything else at that time too. But the legalities of it are very clear. I mean, that's been tested and done. That's why also there's companies that offer ransom insurance.
Okay, so the last question in the situation room. People are still panicking, but hopefully calmly panicking. The role of the legal advisor in that space, and Tiba, I'll ask you for your views. Often it's the case that the legal advice and the legal considerations, which are many, and we'll come to all of that in a bit, are not considered timeously. So the lawyers get called in too late. What's your experience and what's your thoughts on that? And how do you fix it?
So I have been both in-house legal counsel and then come back into external practice. What madness. But I actually have what I think when you're external counsel, or when you're an advocate or an attorney, I mean, how often do you think, I wish I'd been there at the time, or I wish I could have made an intervention at the time? I think you've got to have a lot more empathy for the reality around cybercrime, in that there are a lot of decisions that have to be taken by multiple stakeholders, and people do the best that they can. And the worst that you can do is to be overly critical in those situations. I think it's more important to be supportive. I think it's also really important from a cybercrime perspective, in terms of trying to meet the expectation, is to understand how the technology is being impacted. I find that lawyers are usually a little bit resistant to understanding the technology, resistant to understanding the way that it's evolving, and we're also resistant to the idea about how we, lawyers, and the rest of the employee cohort are actually supportive to cyber criminals. So that awareness is, in fact, really important in terms of how you culturally change something from a legal perspective, from a risk perspective, from a compliance perspective. And it requires a sort of very collaborative and symbiotic relationship between the legal stakeholders, whether they're internal or external, and the rest of the stakeholders within the business, because the decisions have to be taken quickly. And hindsight is 20/20, but there's certainly a level of appreciation for how an organization has to manage its reputation, how it has to manage the sort of long-term consequences, and the role that lawyers have to play in mitigating the exposure, but at the same time supporting the business in its commercial endeavors.
Awesome. Did you want to comment there?
Yeah, no,
as the other lawyer.
No, I think one of the things that, and it's an industry problem. And I think it's something that as lawyers we need to kind of meet the client halfway, because I agree that we have to appreciate that there are internal protocols and stuff like that. But internal legal advisors have budgets. Internal legal advisors have concerns. All right. If you want to make your job easier, okay, make your client feel comfortable enough to be able to call you that they're not going to get an invoice the next day. Okay, because that initial phone call and their comfort to be able to call you in that crisis and they're not going to get a charge makes it your job a lot easier, because what happens is that the right stuff gets done quickly at the right level with initial advice, and they are happy to phone you because they have that relationship with you, and they are not scared that they're going to have to justify their own existence to the execs. All right, and it's something that, as lawyers who are in practice, you need to meet the clients halfway, and that's something that I've found has assisted immensely with my clients, is that making them feel comfortable enough that I'm there to support. Okay, because in the long run, it makes my job easier. I mean, having to reverse the mess ups, all right, because things happen in that there's, you have the fight, flight, or freeze, and sometimes people, get caught up, and you make impetuous decisions where you should be breathing and you should be getting objective advice or bouncing something off someone quickly. But the reason you don't is because you don't want to incur costs yet, because you need to get it improved. You have a budget, or you've exhausted, who you've billed for the month. But the fact of the matter is that it's about you creating that environment for your clients so that they will engage you, because in the long run, it will make it your job easier. It'll make your client's life easier, and it'll have a better result for both businesses.
So we spoke a lot about employees and internal passwords and sort of lax practices and the fault of human behavior. But something a bit more sinister, Jacques, is insider threats and internal the syndicates, etc., that help proliferate cybercrime. Again, what's your thoughts here? And is that proliferating, or is it under control? And particularly in the banking space.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously happens. The syndicates know who work for what companies, what type of access they have to data. And the syndicates, would target individuals that they know are in need of money, etc., or who they can threaten in some way. So, I mean, we've also got some of our legal people there. There are not that many cases that we deal with regularly, but it is something that happens in the banking industry where the syndicates definitely target individuals internally, and it's often to try and get data or information out in terms of either rich data about clients that can then be used to in another business, etc. But yeah, we don't see that many of those cases, but it does definitely happen.
Okay, well, that's actually quite good news. I don't know, Seppo, Jacques, if you'd like to.
So we've actually seen cases where an insider technical person actually sold a computer to one of the syndicate members, and they connected, I still remember now, at the Cape Town Crystal Towers network, and connected right into the organization's network, started collecting data, exfiltrating data to the cloud and other platforms. And then after quite a while, they then saw that someone's onto them, because the security system started alerting. And the reason why it started alerting is one of the accounting systems wasn't working on that day. And when they tried to get that accounting system up, the financial people said, well, there's nothing we can do here. And then from there on, the IT team was involved, tried to get the systems back up, and then they saw that actually there's a file here. It's a ransom note to say this system's encrypted. And obviously the URLs to access to have a chat with the syndicates on Telegram or whichever other platform. Now what happened is, as soon as they saw that they were detected, they started encrypting other files. started encrypting other files. And that's where the investigations, that investigation actually started, because they were starting to encrypt files. That's where then they called the likes of us to start investigating such incidents. But it all started with the insider person giving access to an external syndicate, who, lucky for us, the logs were backed up. So we could see exactly where it comes from, and when we traced back to who last had access to that computer and other computers that were going missing, that's where we identified that actually this computer was handed over to a syndicate. This is not the only computer that was accessing that network at the Crystal Towers in Cape Town, who then connected into the network. So with that was obviously an insider, a very good example of an insider, but there's also the flip side where the organization just doesn't know what's happening within the environment. So in another incident, where no one actually knew what was happening within the organization, the security person who was supposed to monitor the environment says, well, I got training from the third party, about a specific software that they installed and are supposed to manage. The third party trained the one IT person that's there in these systems, but the IT person, I was getting these alerts, but I really don't understand what this is. So on their side, there's no investment in the training of the users in exactly what this is. But on the flip side, there was actually a contract for this third party to actually monitor the environment, and they didn't do that, and that was a big loophole within the organization as well. Okay. So yeah, one of the dark sides of it.
I just want to take it in a slightly different direction as well. We're talking about ransomware, we're talking about attacks on networks, but there's another type of insider threat which is a lot more sinister. Right. I'm going to give you another example, and that is one of the major fitness groups in the country a few years ago almost went under overnight, because just how these businesses work, they are a cash business, so they don't have mechanisms to overdraft, so they have a very tight ship. They get money in from their members. They have a batch process that goes to Discovery and to Momentum to get money in to run their business. So what they had was one of their database design architects became a very disgruntled employee. He had financial problems. He was unhappy. He had a scrap with the leadership. And what he did was, before he left, he put something in the database called a logical bomb, right? And what that is effectively, he set it up. He knew what day that batch process to Discovery Momentum had to run to bring the money back. And basically 3 months after he left, it triggered to basically destroy those files. And no batch processing took place, right? And effectively the next week, people came to work and there was no money in the bank accounts, right? They couldn't pay their bills. They couldn't keep the lights on. They couldn't pay the water. They literally almost went under. And I would never forget the head of the management said to me, but how can we be so dependent on IT? We're a gym group. We do fitness. But the point is every client has this exposure and this risk. So it often is the case where IT guys in organizations have access to the keys to the kingdom. Yeah. They have access to all the financial systems potentially. They have access to all the email, even of the CEO. But they often just seen walking around, and people don't understand the power that they wield in the organizations. And they often, in the early days, I remember when I did InfoSec work for the banks in early 2000s, these guys used to go on stringent background checks and psych evaluations, and like you would for a security clearance. Because at that point, people realized, but these guys hold the keys to the kingdom. And if they become financially strapped, they do desperate things like any human. They end up in a cash loan office. The syndicates hang around there. Listen, just plug this memory stick in and we'll make your 30,000 Rand bill for medical claims go away. It's as easy as that. They're desperate. They think how much damage can they do, and then it's a cascading effect from there. It's just the other side of it.
Yeah. Also, remember the one other type of insider, which is the extorted insider. Remember that case we had about 13 years ago? So it was about 13 years ago, Jacques and I won a case where there was an insider that caused the breach. And this was now in circumstances where it was common for people to integrate their personal profiles on social media, and Twitter and everything else on the platforms, work platforms, and there wasn't a separation. So what had happened is that a bug had come into the system, and it had found some incriminating information on certain individuals, and utilized that to extort the risk of that exposure to extort them to steal from the company, and utilize the data theft through that. And it's quite a sad situation, but it's also it's prevalent, which is why it's important, and we advise our clients to make sure social is separate to the work system.
Maybe just one other or two other things to mention. Something as simple as the fact that we used to work in offices, sit next to each other, and you sort of could see what your colleague was doing. We're seeing incidents where something now happens because a person is not in the office. Somebody may have noticed they're doing something that is irregular, but just the mere fact that you just work from home, some of those things become a bit more difficult to spot. And then, many organizations, including us, spend a lot of money on a technology called data loss prevention, where you're trying to block if somebody tries and sends out an email with ID numbers, bank account numbers, or whatever. And that works. But then, there's somebody that does certain queries, and they take a picture of that with their cell phone and send that off to a syndicate. So it becomes so difficult, and there's so many. And as I say, some practical thing like a person may have been sitting next to that person and may have noticed, why is my colleague doing all of these funny queries? And now you work from home, and it becomes a bit more difficult to spot some of those things. So it remains a challenge. Fraud is by its nature difficult to spot.
Okay, so I think let's pivot, and I'm mindful of time, and we can sit here and talk forever, as you can see. So we wanted to cover digital forensics and evidence preservation, and how does a cybercrime investigation work, and particularly with the nature of the digital assets, data, etc. So maybe Seppo, if you'd like to kick off, and then the colleagues can continue.
Sure. I'll briefly touch on how we collect data in order to preserve it, whether we're going to use it for a court process, court proceedings, or disciplinary proceedings. So it's important, firstly, for the right person to be on the job. And I'll say that I've seen a lot of organizations saying we collected this evidence, and at some point the evidence is destroyed, or it doesn't exist. Because it's important to note that our cases, especially with our court processes now, they take 5-6 years. So the preservation in fact more than 5-6 years for some of the ones that I've been involved in. So it's important to preserve the data correctly. What we normally do is take forensic images of specific computers that have been compromised. But with large organizations that are about 5,000 users, it's just not practical. There's cloud-based platforms that we can use to triage the entire organization, and then only image a subset of data for preservation. What that also does is, as part of the incident response plans, what that also does is it tells us who's been compromised in the organization, and if there's still traces of the ransomware in any form, or maybe still malicious content in all the other computers, those can be cleaned and wiped, right? But in essence, we normally do a forensic image, and then we take that for analysis. And how we normally determine whether there was data exfiltration prior to, or data has been stolen prior to some of the ransomware spreading in the organization, is we analyze all of the logs that are sitting in client servers or in the organization servers, firstly, as well as what was happening on the computer. And it's very telling, because you'll analyze a computer, you'll see that they were trying to crack various passwords, or they were using administrator passwords to log on to all of these systems, copy the data to the cloud, and then encrypt the computers, the systems of the organization. A lot of our cases, we can see that the cyber criminals are also trying to cover their tracks in what they do. So when you investigate this, you will not necessarily see that there was ransom or there was malicious content, because they try to cover their tracks. So what I'm getting into is preserve the data correctly. The correct analysts have to be on the job to analyze the system, and then once we know, then the POPIA and all the other regulatory bodies and systems then kick in. We discuss the findings with the likes of you, whether there's personal information that has been exfiltrated, notify the regulator, report to the relevant law enforcement bodies, so that we are able to they are able to investigate even further than what we can do. And for criminal proceedings, we do then our work and reporting. But as well as when there is a current incident and we analyzing these systems, there has to be quite a lot of communication that's going around, because there's quite a lot of panic, and we've seen every time that there is a panic, something else always goes wrong, So the communication, constant communication. I know there's, people create WhatsApp groups to chat about everything now. So those help, because people get information as and when it happens, and then obviously organizations would have their communication strategy with the media and all of that. So those, when it comes to preservation and analysis of data, it's all actually quite an important chain to put together.
Jeremy, the law enforcement engagements, legal proceedings in the context of investigations.
So really what it goes to, and Seppo is 100% correct, you've got to have the right provider doing it for you with the right experience, because at the end of the day, you've got to assume it's evidence. Okay, and in order to use it as evidence, the proper evidentiary protocols need to be followed. You also, because you've got to remember, at the end of the day, this is going to be put before, if it's civil or it's criminal, it's going to be put before a judge or a regional magistrate, for instance. If it's regulator, it's going to be put before the relevant individuals at the regulator. And sometimes with the courts, you're going to be put by someone that doesn't even remember how to turn on the answering machine, let alone understand the intricate natures of data. But the way the law is developed, and also you got to remember, you as the person now bringing the claim. So let's talk about the civil, for instance. You obviously have to prove on a balance of probabilities. Okay, and the onus is on you to prove your case. Okay, and there are rules in the uniform rules of court that allow the technicalities of challenging the authenticity of your evidence. Okay, because the easiest way to create doubt and to balance the probabilities against you is challenge the authenticity, or say it's been manipulated. And the only way you can ensure to defend that categorically is if someone went and mirrored properly the device and has it sitting securely and was put in an evidence bag, was signed, was done properly, and the people had followed the proper protocols, which obviously these two gentlemen will be able to take you through, but that it sits there waiting. So then you have a copy that is your preserved copy, and then you have your copy which is your working copy. Okay, a lot of the time the client comes here, I found all the dirt, here's the laptop, everything, I've got it all, but the evidence is tainted. Because it's very easy for someone to say, it wasn't me. They say, yeah, someone stole my card, they logged in. And then, but why I say it's important to use guys with experience is, like, for instance, like Jacques would know that we would also go and we would mirror the hard drives of the cameras. So the office cameras, because that only gets kept for 3 months usually with a service provider. So you get that mirror, so because you're going to have to create the circle of evidence, because the person's going to say, yes, you've got a log of me, but prove that it was me. I didn't have my card at the time. All right, and you have your onus to prove your evidence. Otherwise, you can't use it. Okay, and that's even more with the criminal case, because the criminal case you've got to go beyond reasonable doubt, and you need to make sure that the evidence is preserved properly for the police to utilize. And they won't even accept it if it's tainted. They will not look at it. They're very happy if you use your external providers because that saves them effort and costs, and they don't have the capacity and a lot of the time the expertise to be able to do it properly. But if you try and hand them a laptop as your evidence, for instance, they won't take it, right? Because they're not inclined to pursue a case where there's a potential that the evidence is tainted, can't be proved, it's been manipulated. So if you ever want to see proper relief or get close to it, on the civil side at least, let's not talk about the SAPs, but you want to be in a position that your evidence is preserved properly up front, and that's again making sure the right provider is utilised and the right advice is given up front on how the client must behave.
So Jacques Milan, crypto assets, so following the crooks through the trail of their digital spoils. Tell us a bit about that.
So there's this perception about cryptocurrency that it all, and I don't understand where it started, but there's this perception that blockchain makes that money just disappear, right? If it's there, then it's gone. It's actually the contrary to that. When I get a cryptocurrency investigation, I get very excited because I know that if it is on the blockchain, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever the case may be, we can trace it wherever it goes, and we can see where it moves. We can see where it moves to an exchange, because ultimately, when it's in cryptocurrency form, it needs to be converted to fiat currencies somewhere, whether it's euro or dollar or yen, so you need an exchange, right? So you can't. And as long as it's in the chain, it can move through 7,000 different wallet addresses. We can see it go. We can see when it goes. We can see how much. So it's a beautiful system. And I don't need, imagine following a money trail through 20 different banks over the planet, of which one is in China and one is in South Korea and one is in Ukraine. Imagine the legal nightmare you will need to get that right. Whereas I can open my browser with a few scripts and I can follow it. I don't need a search warrant. I don't need a legal mandate. I can just literally watch it go. Now, the addresses themselves, what we call non-custodial wallets. In other words, I can have a wallet on my phone or in my possession, which is a unique address. Now, when it's there, like hackers would steal crypto, for example, or ask for ransomware in cryptocurrency, it's in that address. For that moment, we don't necessarily know who it belongs to, but it has to go somewhere. It has to move somewhere to be useful. So what they typically do is they pay the ransom in, the hacker then waits a while, a few days, and then moves it somewhere so that he can convert it into cash or you collateralize it. So the moment he does that, then we can see where it goes. So, and then obviously there's a process. We can see it goes to Binance or wherever the case may be. So it is complex in a way, but it is also extremely powerful to trace where it actually goes in the end. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Tayiba now, and let's unpack the law. Cybercrimes legislation, data protection legislation. Maybe you just want to go through it very briefly, and then we can perhaps have a chat about the efficacy and what's working, what's not working.
Okay, so without sort of going through the entire list, of the universe of laws, we have the Cybercrimes Act. I suppose in the greater scheme of things, relatively new legislation when you think about the history of cybercrime. But we have obviously got POPIA, the financial industry. You've got joint standards in terms of cyber resilience and IT governance. So there's a universe of laws that apply, and depending on the nature of a particular cybercrime, there could be other pieces of legislation that might impact on intellectual property or the like. So I think, without sort of going into the, and I tend to think that Seppo and Jeremy probably have some more in-depth out or views in terms of this. There's an inherent inefficacy, and you can see that in terms of reports from Interpol across the world in terms of the criminal justice system's ability to respond to cybercrime. It is, and the problem is cybercrime is consistently evolving. The way that it's, and AI is impacting on that. Quantum computing is going to in fact impact on that, and there isn't really a really substantially good response that we can see in any criminal justice system across the world. The jurisdictional challenges that face lawyers in terms of being able to actually successfully prosecute cybercrime is very, very difficult, if not impossible. So that is an inhibitor. From a regulatory perspective, our own regulator, newer in its inception and its operation in terms of receiving these reports on data breaches on a regular basis and a daily basis, and they've recently sort of got their e-portal going. They don't have the mechanics, they don't have the capacity to actively investigate and have a response. And we'll say, okay, well, that's an African problem, but it's not. I mean, the ICO in the UK is saying exactly the same thing. They don't have the capacity and the resources to be able to actually investigate all of the responses, all of the reports that they're receiving in relation to, more often than not, ransomware attacks. And it is a difficult situation for an organization to be in, paired with the reality that if you have insurance, your insurers are now sort of creating more and more resistance to the type of cover that they will offer you. And so when you look at that entire sort of ecosystem of how the law is supposed to support you from a criminal liability and a criminal and a civil liability perspective, it's perhaps not well suited. And I think there are lots of conversations that happen in lots of forums. We've seen it in the EU, we've seen it in other parts of the world. But really, it would take a very, very big effort to create a uniform jurisdiction with a uniform system that would be able to successfully prosecute cybercrime, and it would require participation from every country in the world, which at this point in time, let's face it, is unrealistic. So in terms of the legal mechanics, they're there. How they're effective, are they efficient in terms of being able to support an organization in meeting the threat and being able to stem it? I don't think so. I'm sorry to be so cynical on a Wednesday afternoon.
So maybe let's take it right down to grassroots, and I'll come to you in a moment, Jacques. But the people on the ground, what is your experience in South Africa with SAPS and the like, and the cybercrimes legislation?
Look, I think I'll be careful what I say, because we do sometimes assist the NPA and the DPCR. But look, at the end of the day, and we say this to clients, it's, as T correctly says, it's great, we've got legislation, we've got theoretical ways that things should work. But any of you that have been in practice have seen that the textbooks tell you one thing, but the actual implementation and practicalities of things are different. And then also you then take business, reputational risk, and all those other things that have to be taken into account when dealing with things. And the easiest example I give to my clients in making sure their expectations are managed when it comes to the authorities, who are already underpaid, under-resourced, and have a long way to go. I mean, state capture showed us that the departments were systematically undermined and destroyed from the inside out. But at the end of the day, you pay a private security company to protect you. You've got alarm systems here, you've got them that do roaming 24 hours. That is you taking what should be the police's jobs into your own hands. Okay. The same applies in relation to your cyber security. The same applies people. How many of us have gotten solar power or generators to deal with the power problem? We have to take. I know privatization is a swear word, but in order to, if we want things to develop and to get it done properly, we can't only rely on the infrastructures that are there and yes, the legislation that's there, and it's also for this place to advance. People need to take, as businesses, as individuals, and it's not like something we haven't been doing for years. I mean, how long have you been paying for your security company? That's the job that the cops are doing, that should be doing for you, and that you'll get in the States. But it's no different. It's about us we're a resistant society. I love this place. There's a reason I'm still here. Okay? Not just because I can't transfer my law and legal degree without having to study again. But no, that's a side issue. But the fact of the matter is that it's about us actually not waiting for the SAPs to do their jobs. I mean, we assist clients a lot with what's called complainant-assisted investigations, where we try and assist with capacity, right? But you're also in a situation where we can take the rugby ball to the try line, but we can't score with a try, okay? But you, as individuals and as companies, need to be taking steps to protect yourselves and put things in place that you can control your environments, so that it is not only easier to get a case across the line, be it civil or because there are civil remedies. Okay, and sometimes principles are expensive. Yes, it's lacquer to put someone behind bars, but you don't want to be spending 10 million rand to get that ultimate effect. You'd rather report it to the police and, if possible, recover what you can civilly. But you need to put things in place where you've got to manage those expectations, because the SAPs, in our experience, and not for negligence and in the main any other malfeasance or political agendas, they can't give you what we require because the infrastructure is not there. So if you're going to rely on them to do the job for you, that's why I say go back to the example of your security company that you pay, because it's the easiest one. You do it comfortably every month, you pay it monthly, gives you your peace of mind, and you're getting the security you need. But that's actually a function which your tax money should be utilized to the police to give you that security. But we don't get that, and we as a society understand and accept that. And we've got to kind of use that mentality to develop and adapt whilst the AI space adapts, because that's what's happening. And people that are not adapting with it are the ones that are going to get caught out. And that's just what we see.
Yeah, so I think on that, Jacques, from your perspective, they're often the case that corporates and private businesses need to assist law enforcement to help catch these crooks. Any experience or thoughts around how that's worked, or whether it does work?
Yeah, I first maybe just want to use just the illustration. I mean, I think the challenge, if we look in the past, you would have a branch, and a robber would come, balaclava, guns, and they would they would rob the bank, and you would prosecute because it's localized under the law, whatever. With cyber, the criminal can be sitting in Russia, in the US, in Swaziland, or wherever the case may be, and it just becomes like you said, with a Bitcoin, which can make it easier potentially with blockchain, but with normal prosecution, I guess, of cyber criminals, there's so much collaboration that need to take place across borders with different institutions that I think it is extremely complex, and that's why I think the success rate with prosecution is probably so low. But definitely, from our case, our forensic departments do work with law enforcement. Even though they may not think the law enforcement is sufficiently staffed and experienced to deal with all the issues, they do try and make sure where they can, even sometimes from a perspective, try and assist with certain cases. I mean, there's been instances where we've been doing cases where we would where we would drive documents to the courts or whatever, where we try and facilitate the process just to get things going and moving along. So definitely, I think the private sector is trying to play our part in helping the legal process along as well.
And the other Jacques, the white hatters, your role?
Yeah, so I mean, I think back, I was in a privileged position to help create a cyber incident response team within the Scorpions many years ago. And what I learned there was how powerful the public-private partnership can be. I mean, the state will never have enough resources to employ the best experts out there in the field. And in fact, hackers in general are not socially very good with structure and discipline, and they are free-thinking people. So you can leverage that skill in a partnership, but having said that, have critical resources. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we do embrace it when we can to empower people also with knowledge, because our experiences with law enforcement is, unfortunately, the skills transfer is very valuable to them because they don't know. I remember many years ago, the first time a client of ours went into a police station to lay an affidavit for a hacking, and the policeman asked this person, "But where's the axe? Where's the weapon?"
Yeah.
Right? And he didn't understand that it's not that type of hacking. And I mean, this is now funny to us, but that is where they started, because there was no. There are initiatives, and I mean, whenever, I mean, it is our responsibility. Just that awareness about it, just what is happening out there, and then who they can call, and we do see that happen at least more now than it used to.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have reported a case recently, but they still don't understand what hacking is. They'd ask, where's the crime scene? Where did the crime occur? If you say on the internet, can you wait for someone else who's starting at 6 o'clock to try and investigate this? My shift is ending soon. I don't know if you guys, it's very frustrating.
Look, I think one of the nice things about the Cybercrimes Act coming in now, it's a positive thing, because I mean, I remember as a junior sitting there arguing in court with a prosecutor trying to explain what theft of an incorporeal thing is, the common law offence, because that's the only thing you could rely on at the stage for stealing data. And now it's actually codified in statute, and it is easier to get a policeman to act on a breach of statute as opposed to a statutory offence, as opposed to having to explain the common law principles. And so that is a positive thing that I think has really changed in our industry, that we will hopefully see positive outcomes for, because it takes away a lot of the old technical elements that needed to be proved and required for purposes of these offences, because now the law is actually adapting to appreciate what it is. Like Jacques says, there's no more looking for the hacking via the acts, because it's defined in the act.
It's quite interesting. This is what Sebo says. I've had a client recently who went to started at one police station, and then was I'm here to report a cybercrime. They were like, nah, I don't feel like it. Let's try the next one, and then went to the next one. Funny story. This was in the Western Cape, where we think things work better, but then they went to the next police station, and they were like, yeah, we don't think that your jurisdiction is right, because we think your servers are in the other place. Okay, fine. Guy gets up, he goes to the next place, and eventually it was the case of trying to report this was such a so that, and when you think about the next step, which is investigating it, it feels like who's actually going to step up at the average. I mean, scorpions aside, one doesn't feel like it's.
But I think in that context, I agree. But what we see happen now is we often see it as, okay, we'll explain with the client what a hacking is, what actually happened, and we're actually after the case number, because if we have the case number, it unlocks us to do what we need to do. We can subpoena our phone records.
Yeah.
We can geolocate people. We can find IP addresses for internet. So then we can actually, because I agree, leaving it with them, unfortunately, because of lack of skills and training, they will go nowhere at this point in general.
Yeah, I think that's why we do the investigation for them after the case number has been allocated. But have you seen the amount of dockets that are sitting there?
Yeah.
You have to follow up and call every day. Even if they've got the information, just to issue a subpoena sometimes it's another problem. So that's why that's why the partnership is important with the law enforcement to aid them into doing their job. And at the end of the day, the reporting then is correct, because we are the ones that are helping them take it further with the prosecution.
But also the skills transfer is the most important because, like I say, like we can only do so much. The state has to maintain that level of objectivity. So to go back to my example before, we can take the rugby ball to the try line, but there's that portion where someone has to score the try, and it still has to be the state. So that's where we can put it in a bow, make it nice, and and sit there ready from an evidentiary point of view. But you've got that slight risk. And I'm not saying that we're not good. We have some excellent prosecutors. I worked with some very excellent prosecutors over the last few years, which I highly respect. But the problem is, as I say, that the case files are like this, and you have people that are dealing with these matters that don't have the support, don't have the experience, and they still need to get it over the line. So as good as your case may be, it still may not succeed. So, and that's the risk.
And training interventions such as these also help because then more people know exactly what to do when a cybercrime happens.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I want to pull back. We've had a cybercrime incident. It's been reported. It's been investigated. Some things were done about it technically, and looking at it from a legal risk perspective. So one of the things that is often forgotten is what are the repercussions. So with a data breach, there is information involved, and often it's third-party information. So it could be clients, employees, suppliers, etc. Jacques, you mentioned the Situation Room and figuring out who's impacted by the incident. But in the aftermath, there's a lot of consideration of, are there any risks from a contractual breach perspective? Any other laws? Tiba, you mentioned there's a plethora of laws that can be triggered, specifically in the financial services sector, where there are so many reporting obligations, confidentiality obligations, and the like. So I just wanted a little discussion to illustrate that it doesn't stop there. There could be claims for damages and other liability exposures that arise. So I don't know, Jeremy, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, everything's factual specific. I mean, yes, there's legislative issues, but from a contractual point of view, is that you have your obligations of confidentiality and duties that flow from the various contracts with your third parties, and with their information being exposed, even though it's beyond your control, you need to be able to be in a position where you can indicate that you discharged your duty of care to them, and that you acted properly, and that you had an adequate security posture in place to try and prevent it, because that is your protection. Because you can't control unforeseen circumstances. We can't cover for everything. Okay? But you also can't be negligent, because the case that would be brought against you would be grossly negligent in the fact that you didn't have the adequate processes, the minimum adequate processes that should have been in place to protect their data. And if that results in a harm to them, they can come after you for damages. The other problem is you have also certain issues where if you do work for the state, and certain areas of the state work is highly confidential, and it's an offence if that information is put into the public domain, and you have a higher standard of care owing under the Act, such as particularly if it's related to the presidency, and you have the securities there, you have to be very careful. And the basic and most important thing to do is categorize and know your data, okay, so that you know where your risks are, and that you're not trying to assume later what your risks are. Like you try to say, I might have this confidentiality requirement because it usually is there for an SLA, or I might have this, I might have that. You need to be able to have that documented up front without an incident, so that when something happens, you know where your risks are. But I can't give you and say to you now, this is the risk, that is the risk. All I can say is that it's factually dependent. It is possible, there is liability that can attract, but there's steps that can be taken to mitigate that or prevent it.
Tiba?
I think in terms of, when you think about risk and from a slightly different perspective, on a lot of sort of transactions where you're evaluating the value of an organization, the value is actually more now sitting at a data level and the integrity of data. So where the banks, for example, are funding transactions, we see a much higher level of interest in what the integrity of the data is, how those risks are being managed on those funding transactions. On the back of the risk is no longer necessarily just operationally. Certainly from an IT perspective, it's a much higher. There's a much higher concentration in terms of looking under the hood and understanding where the value of the business is and whether that part of the business has been compromised in any way. And we see that across the board in terms of how businesses, the consideration for businesses is actually determined, because you find that actually you can shave off 100 million rand on a transaction now on the back of not having appropriate cybersecurity controls, not having appropriate backup and retention strategies, not having appropriate data protection strategies. So it's much more important in terms of the interventions that lawyers can make and the interventions that risk and compliance potentially can make in terms of helping to understand that the value of a business is actually now determined by its data and how it protects that data.
Any thoughts from your perspective, Jacques?
Yeah, I guess the onus is on us to, like you said, show that you've taken reasonable care, that you've done the best to get your security posture. I said before, we're fortunate in a way that we've got the regulatory oversight. Interesting the way that our regulator has changed. They do what they call on-sites, where they come and visit the banks on certain topics where there's AML or whatever. And cyber is one of the regular topics that they have on-sites. And they changed their tact over the last 2 years, where it used to be death by PowerPoint. We had to present on everything that we do to protect the bank, and they changed their tone to say, "Show me, don't tell me." So it's more a case of them coming in, and we've got to actually log into the live systems and show them this is how we run this, this is how we do that. So I think that is part of the making sure that you are in the right, you've done all the right steps that a reasonable person would do. I mean, like Jacques said, with cyber, it's unfortunately a case of when it happens, and I can promise you when it happens, it's not fun, but there are reasonable steps that you can try and do to prove that you have done everything sort of possible under your control, and then you deal with the aftermath.
Thank you. I think on that point we are literally otherwise going to speak for the rest of the evening. I'm going to pause there and open the floor to questions finally, and then we might come back for final comments from the panelists. Okay, any questions? There's a mic coming.
The mic is becoming popular now.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fight soon.
I was just about to project, but thank you. Thank you very much for the discussion. Really, really interesting, and appreciate your insights. I think it's very refreshing to hear a discussion about cyber and digital issues that doesn't result in corporate AI grifting speak. Mm-hmm. So I think this is really, really nice to hear. My question is a pointed one, and it deals with the question of big tech accountability in South Africa. So I'm not going to go into the criminal aspects because we know what the issues are, as you've discussed, but particularly when it comes to attribution of liability to a big tech. So in circumstances where you don't have you're not a big company that has an SLA with Microsoft in South Africa with local data servers. Say, for instance, you're using a G Suite solution and the data servers are sitting in the US somewhere, and there's a data breach. Now you want to look at civil liability or civil remedies. Do you have any experience in litigating in those types of scenarios, and how do you overcome the jurisdictional barriers that are in place? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. A little biased, but we've dealt with a case just like that. So I'm going to ask Jeremy to answer that, and then Seppo, Tay, if you have any
Sorry, I mean that goes to the legal side of it. I mean, it's the contractual arrangement that you have with the provider. I mean, the obviously the information regulator has its views on who the custodian is and where the responsibilities lie. But in terms of the litigation and recourse point of view, there is the ability. The problem that you have is the contractual jurisdiction, and unfortunately, because of the way the land is at present with the tech stuff, and because it's so novel, and the guys that are the key players are the dominant players. And Preet and myself find ourselves a lot of the time, it's the same sort of position, and there's a lot of, they have a lot of bargaining power and everything else. But one of the most important things is your jurisdiction is going to be in California, or it's going to be in the US, or it's going to be in Delaware. So you're fighting there. All right. There are some ways that you can try and bring intellectual claims, but at the end of the day, it's very hard where you have a contract that puts you sitting in California where you have to go and litigate. What we've done from time to time is I do a lot of cross-border litigation management, where the clients will use me because I'm rand cheap to manage the strategy and the coordination of the matter. But we would have to have local counsel on the ground there in advancing the case, because it's the only way you can do it, unfortunately. One of the biggest things that we're seeing, with all these deep fakes and everything else that we're having to try and deal with, because Facebook and your Meta, effectively, their terms are very clear. And I mean, as much as they say they want to be helping, I mean, they make money from their advertising, and their policy is a reactive one. And as long as they take it down when you report it, they've complied. So until someone takes the steps like they did with the nudity steps in Instagram, where there's a positive injunction on them, okay, to put in the right algorithms to prevent these things from occurring, it's not going to happen. Okay? And in order to do that, you need to take the fight to them. And the costs to benefit ratio of you as a smaller company here taking on in dollars a major conglomerate, you're just going to lose. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't make business sense, as much as you have the legal right to do it. But that's, in short, how you deal with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think to echo what Jeremy's saying is the terms and conditions are written with so many disclaimers, lawyers like us, so they're well written and they're prohibitive in terms of actually being able to sometimes institute. What I found on the corporate side in terms of when you're evaluating your liability, if you're unhappy or something has transpired within AWS, for example, on the one hand, you might want to be able to take some action, but on the other hand, who do you go to if you don't go to AWS? And so when you're making those decisions, you're no longer making the decisions about whether you're going to, it's the sustainability of a business, and it doesn't necessarily make sense from a cost perspective, as Jeremy said, but it doesn't also make sense from a strategy perspective either. So I think most organizations just kind of will feel affronted in South Africa about some of these situations, but they don't actually pursue them.
They change providers.
Okay, Zanele.
Mine, Preacher, is not... sorry, this is a flu voice. Mine is not a question. It's more a comment based on what Jeremy said, two things that Jeremy said. The first one is around the issues with the SEPs. And I think for me that is actually a challenge on us lawyers to say we pay taxes, however we need as citizens to assist our law enforcement authorities. And I think there's a challenge here for us to say what can we do as an industry that is legal? As lawyers, what can we do to ensure that when our clients, I work in a bank, when our clients go to SEPs, they are able to report these crimes easier because we have provided the tools to the police to be able to understand this. I think it is expecting too much of a policeman to understand these issues that have taken us. I mean, we all went to varsity for not less than 4 years, and it's still hard for us to understand it. So it's too much for us to expect them to understand these issues. And I think this should be a challenge to us as lawyers to say, how can we assist our law enforcement authorities to deal with these and understand so that it's easier for the public to report these crimes at police stations. And the second one, sorry, Jeremy, the second one is also something that you mentioned, Jeremy, around how do you, as a practicing lawyer, attorney, ensure that clients find it easier to come to you. I think it's the no money, nothing for Mahala is actually a psychological concept.
Yes.
That if a client knows that they can come to you to get those quick questions for free, they feel obligated to come to you afterwards for a fee-paying instruction. So for me, this is another challenge to the lawyers in the room, that you shouldn't always think that every minute and 15 minutes and 30 minutes should be charged when you answer questions for clients. And I'm saying that from a perspective of a client, that when you do answer those questions, there is a psychological thing that happens to me that says, actually, since I asked Prita this, I probably need to go to her with an instruction. So yeah, just those two issues.
So you agree with my comment then?
I agree.
Yeah. No, look, to go to your first point, and that's why I was saying that, private needs to get involved. There is actually an initiative underway, and my partner that leads our division, our corporate investigations, has been at the forefront and spearheading the initiative with the SARB as one of the companies, as one of the entities, is where they try to motivate for this public-private partnership, so that it's not only where there is a big matter that warrants lots of money being thrown at it to get a resolution, but that we are able to upskill and develop and get private contributions. And I know there are a lot of banks that are interested in getting involved, and there is momentum, but I think there needs to be more of a private and societal push towards that direction to encourage it, because, as I said, it's about the skills transfer. Because initially, yes, it's a cost, because you have to hire these individuals that have the expertise and have the capacity, because these are, as you said, highly commercial crimes. I mean, there's a lot to understand, and you're expecting police officers and prosecutors that are maybe 2 years out the gate to understand this, and it's not fair. You want to be able to give them that support. And the whole theory behind this, to my partner's credit, is that it's to, yes, there's a learning curve and cost up front, but it's going to eventually, come to a point where the skills are going to transfer. The guys are going to start getting more expertise. And the same way our juniors are nurtured to become experts, the same thing will apply. Okay? And as long as those principles are adhered to and the playing rules are there, because unfortunately many years ago, and I don't know if some of you remember, and I might be giving away my age here, is that the state used to use very often advocates to run the more technical cases. And the problem is that they stopped doing it because the advocates, as per the CAB rank rule, one day they're on their side, the next day they're on the defence's side, and they could use what they knew and the holes to take advantage of it, so they stopped doing it. But, that was taking an essential kind of asset, which is the ability to transfer knowledge to the juniors from these counsel that have experience. So we're trying to achieve the same thing, but it's got to be on a basis where it's like a mutual understanding, mutual respect, and in the interest of fostering justice, ethically and appropriately, and making sure that the playing rules are still there. There's no bias, that the objective nature of the state is still adhered to, and that they can put a claim together properly and learn to do it themselves. But until such time as they have the capacity and the expertise, there needs to be assistance from the private sector.
I know that...
Pleasure.
So it's interesting. I'm sorry, I know you posed the question to Jeremy, but it was interesting because there are quite a few use cases for bots that are basically supporting law enforcement in terms of questions. So within a sort of contained environment, using the AI to support. So if they have questions about how the law works, that then sort of gives them an indication of what the law actually says, how it applies. We have some initiatives that have worked quite well in terms of gender-based violence, but that's easily replicated. And it's actually much easier now to deploy. So it is important.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? The mic, there's a few hands. Sorry, I don't know which who's first, but maybe.
I've got the mic, so I can proceed.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. Just for interest's sake, I obviously wanted to study this and things happened. So you have a situation where with a community that now has these devices, somebody can literally engage them from Hong Kong or wherever. Information is exchanged, either their ID, bank account, with the hope that some monies will be, paid to them, whether it's trading, whatever. So how are we, educating the community? We understand as lawyers, we are able to understand what cybercrime is. But then with this person, a lay person, that has this device that is being used to commit crime. For instance, you would be able to check if I'm trading and I'm told, put this money on this account, it will multiply to whatever. And you put it on Luno or whatever to be converted to cryptocurrency, whatever the case may be. But you cannot really spot as to a fake account has been opened in terms of trading and whatever the case may be. So how are we able to give this information to those whom crime is being committed and they're not aware? At some point, they'll press a button to transfer a certain amount to whatever account. Later on, it's nowhere to be found. And the device that you have is of this person that thought they were transferring money. They don't even know what's happening. I don't know if I'm making sense, but we have this drama that is happening where our brothers and sisters are being deceived and crime is happening. They have the device, they don't know what's happening.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's investment scams, pig butchering scams, and the like. And I think Jacques, you can maybe give a view.
Look, and I mean, absolutely, and it's becoming more and more extreme. I always say two things to people, and this is what we should say to everybody: is when it comes to technology and phones, emails, trust no one. Right? That's it. Secondly, phone a friend. So just as an example, one of my family members, elderly person, got a phone call from a bank, said, "Are we from fraud department?" They had all the information, ID number, address, everything. They just wanted an OTP to confirm, right, that came through. And luckily, this has been the conversation of when somebody phones you, just stop for a moment and think and rather say, "Thank you, I will phone the bank," or "Thank you, I will verify myself." And it's literally just that of don't just trust, because they are extremely good at social engineering now. I mean that information, it's on the dark web, they harvest it from people within organizations. So it's become like that, and it's an awareness thing. If we can just make people aware of this, that they must just not just trust anybody that phones them from any number, and secondly, just that time aspect. Nothing will change if I just take the time to first just phone the bank myself and say, "Hello, has my account been hacked? Is there a transaction that gone through?" And it's that emotion that they play on, that awareness must help to cool down, because it's a big issue.
But I think also, just going to your point of the fact that you're asking in respect to the people that don't have the knowledge, that aren't ordinarily exposed to these things, and wouldn't be able to, or are susceptible to these kind of crimes, because if I'm going to put in 100 Rand of my wages and I'm going to get 4 grand at the end of the month, I'm going to do it. And it's really, as Jacques says, the key thing is awareness, but it goes back to my point about companies taking responsibility too. I mean, when you log into your bank, okay, you always get notifications on your cyber thing saying, "Oh, careful, there's phishing events going on. This is how it happens, be careful. This is what we see is going on." It happens often, all right? There's no reason why every person that has a cell phone and that all these crimes are committed on, which is what you're talking to here, is the service provider can very easily send text awareness messages to the phones to just warn them about these things. And I think that's the start of it. And it's encouraging that sort of behavior, which is not costly to the providers, the MTNs, the Vodacoms, and everything else, but to bring that awareness to those areas. And I think that's what's lacking, and that's what needs to be done. And that's my suggestion. But it's about, again, it's awareness and training, and within reason and within means. But guys are being affected on a phone. It means they have a phone, it means they have a SIM card, and that SIM card can receive a message from the provider. And that's how you can convey that awareness and just start the training.
I think it's our responsibility even here to just also go back, have the conversation with, your family, have a conversation with the staff in your home, have the conversation with, children across the board, because that hopefully, a lot of the NPOs who do a lot of research on this actually say that that's what actually spurs a sense of security is in community, with people talking to each other. They actually spread the word, and that's actually perhaps a very effective way of being able to protect our elderly, protect our children.
Okay, there's a question there. You've waited patiently.
I don't want to dampen everyone's spirits, but I sit here with full empathy for what you're trying to do. Coming from the state, I prosecuted for a very long time. I understand the prosecution side of it, the lack of skill and training, and the police, the difficulty liaising with the police. And in as much as you want to foster this private-public partnership, it becomes very difficult when you don't have buy-in from one side. You might have the passion to want to transfer these skills, but if there's no buy-in from the most senior people in government, you're going to have a problem. And like Jacques said, these are commercial crimes. But it's not your ordinary commercial crimes. It's sophisticated criminals. So when you're dealing with sophisticated criminals and technical legislation, you've got to have people who are also becoming sophisticated, who are also should be able to interpret this legislation. And you can have a bot, or you can have a prosecutor, but at the end of the day, the cross-examination skills become very important, and that's something that cannot be taught. It cannot be transferred. But so what's going to happen is that you need to transfer these skills to your more experienced prosecutors. Like you say, people who have 2 years to leave. But that's a reality. You have to have an in-depth knowledge and experience to deal with matters of this nature. And that is why you get files sitting in people's offices, because they simply don't know what to do. Yeah. When you approach a police to open a docket, it's too complicated for them. And that is why they want to pass the buck. But before you invest as private companies, you need to know that this huge investment that you're going to make is actually going to make a difference, and it's not going to become part of the problem. Because we talk about capacity, it seems like it's a cliche. This department doesn't have capacity and that department doesn't have capacity. But what I can tell you, the capacity is more than sufficient. You just don't have committed employees to do the job. And the problem comes not only with the employees, the more junior employees, it's the management. Yeah. They become so comfortable that they don't care anymore. It becomes a time waiting for retirement.
Yeah. Underpaid and underappreciated.
NPA probably overpaid.
Yeah. Well, look, the one thing I would encourage you to do is that I see actually the individual I was talking about has actually come. He's joined us at the end. I would encourage you to have a discussion with him also after this, because we are accounting for that in the way that we're trying to model the way this is trying to go. It's about putting a system that works, that doesn't get wasted. That's not just about other law firms making money. Okay,
and even
it's about actually building and rebuilding what we used to be able to rely on from an infrastructure that was systematically destroyed.
If you take it right up to the NPA, the head, you probably won't get a successful prosecution. because she hasn't done a matter like this before. It hasn't come before her before. So, but now she has to lead the juniors. It's not going to work. You've got to, from the top down, you've got to have the skill. And a lot of prosecutors left because of the problems in the system. And those that probably would have been able to interpret, understand, cross-examine, get the result, are no longer there. That's the problem. But just from my perspective, not to waste resources on an already problematic system. And this is so important because, I mean, it's big organizations, it's lots of money, it's high value. So there should be a dedicated unit to deal with this. And also Section 38 prosecutors, even lawyers from big law firms can be used as Section 38 prosecutors to prosecute the crimes. And maybe that's how skills can be transferred. But the prosecutor who is attached to you must have the willingness and to learn.
Yeah, but I think also, like, talking to your point about the AI bots, like, I agree that AI bots are useful, and I'm very much a proponent for utilizing AI in law within reason. But the thing that cannot be taught, cannot be replaced, let's put it that way, by the AI, is the ability to have that argument, to pivot in the room, to learn how to cross-examine properly. It's a skill, it's an art, but you need to be trained that way. And because there's this kind of lack of skill, when I talk about skills transfer, I mean at all levels. I mean the ability of one person who has an experience in cross-examining, being able to sit there and teach the people as they grow. When you're building a docket, that you have the right senior defense counsel who looks at that docket and stress tests it. Say, all right, I have to take this apart. Where would I take it apart? This is where I need to fix it. Then we fix it, and then you take it through. And that's teaching your RO how to properly build an investigative docket. It's teaching the prosecutor where their holes are and how they can improve on their case and advancing their case. And also helping them build their argument themselves. And teaching them the skills and having at least a mentor, a sounding board. I mean, it's no different to private practice. Okay, it's in public practice you're the greater good. We unfortunately we chose capitalism. The fact of the matter is that it's really it's being able to the position we're trying to achieve is not just throwing money into the ether and back into the state for nothing. It's making sure, and I know the initiative is very much geared at maintaining strict controls so that we achieve the very benefit that you're looking for.
And you don't want your prosecutor to be just like you.
Yeah.
You want your prosecutor to be better than you.
But it's like my juniors. I want my juniors to be better than me all the time. Exactly. I want to train them so that they are excellent. It's all I want. And there's no reason why I shouldn't be the same with the MPA.
Thank you, thank you. I've just realized the time, and we really have gone on for a long time, but the floor is yours, Bernard. I see you've got the mic. Go ahead.
I've got a mic. Maybe I don't need a mic.
No
Hello, Zanele. Hello, Willie. So perhaps I can just put something forward which I think there's been a very, very interesting conversation, but I'd like to throw something out to the floor also about the importance of the public-private partnership. First of all, you're 100% correct in the sense, and the last comment that was made, you're 100% correct in the difficulties that we face at present with investigating and prosecuting highly complex commercial cases. Do I think that they're going to be resolved in the short term? No. Do I think that it's imperative that there is a proper partnership put in place which benefits at every single level, from the very first opening of a docket to presenting a case in court? Every single step that's taken by whichever person takes it has to be with a level of perfection, because at the end of the day, the onus of proving beyond reasonable doubt is a very, very heavy onus. And unless you're going to do justice to the task from the very beginning, don't start. There is, unfortunately, a kind of mindset in the NPA, certain parts of the NPA. I can say that for the last 7 years, I've had the privilege of the public-private partnership in relation to the investigation and prosecution of the VBS wrongdoers. And I can tell you without shadow of a doubt, we have 3 prosecutors who we're working with. Very senior prosecutors. The one gentleman's name is Hein van der Merwe, who is one of the most senior people. And it is amazing that if a man like he, who's worked within the NPA for so many decades, can actually embrace the notion of the partnership with integrity and dedication and perfection, then there's no excuse for anybody other than him not to do so. And likewise, there's 2 other prosecutors, a lady by the name of Salome Venemans and another lady by the name of Hilke Meyer. And these 3 individuals we've got on our desk right now, I would say, running about 40, 45 separate prosecutions going at the same time. What we have to accept is that nobody wants to willingly go to jail. The only way that you're going to get somebody to jail is when they realize that the evidence that you've got against them is so overwhelming that they then make a decision to plead guilty, as you saw with Mr. Chifio Matotsi, who's pleaded guilty as a state witness. There's already somebody who's already out on parole. He pleaded guilty right at the beginning. He was the financial director. Now, what do we find is we've got Stalingrad tactics on steroids. And the only thing to do with Stalingrad tactics on steroids is to say to the reprobates who are committing who are perpetuating these tactics is, it doesn't matter. Bring it, because guess what? We've got the evidence, and the evidence isn't going to go away. And you have to have that commitment. So I think that it can be done. It is frustrating. It is a very, very sensitive area to navigate because, believe it or not, you get this defense. Ooh, this prosecution is complainant driven. Well, sorry, what does that mean? Every prosecution is complainant driven. What's wrong with it? As long as you comply with proper procedures and there's nothing untoward, well, deal with the evidence. Stop squealing. There's a particular advocate who likes to squeal about these things. Deal with the evidence rather. That's the reality. It can work, but the disciplines that are required, Jacques, with whom I've worked for close on 25 years, you don't get anybody better than that. Forensic accountants, utilize them. Cell phone analysts, utilize them. Don't think that in an investigation you can cherry pick and only use one discipline. The crimes stretch across all the disciplines, and you've got to use all of the disciplines. The second thing that I want to throw out to you, which is quite encouraging, I see that this conference is headed women and juniors in law and banking. So I apologize for attending in my capacity. But there is a particular woman who I have the pleasure of working with. Her name is General Sentamule. General Sentamule, and I encourage all of you to look her up, happens to be in charge of all the detectives nationally and the forensic lab. She is so committed to rebuilding. And when I say rebuilding, it's not that she'll forgive me for saying this, she's not a youngster. She's in my decade. And she believes that what we need is more and more detectives, skilled detectives, to be educated and to fight the scourge of crime. I attended a dinner about a month ago, attended by the Minister of Police, who signed this charter committing, and this is a challenge to Nedbank, committing the public-private partnership. I want you to visualize the following. The General has a dream about a police station. She wants to redesign all the police stations and she wants to utilize technology. Can you imagine coming to a police station where you see a sign that says, please be aware, this police station is guarded by police, and there's also CCTV cameras. So everything you do is being monitored. And you walk in and somebody comes up to you and says, what are you here to report? And you're like, I'm here to report an assault. Okay, please go and take a seat in the waiting room. Your number will be called. And when you're sitting in the waiting room, there may be posters on the wall that says, if you're here to report certain offences in all languages, please remember these are the elements of the crime that you need to tell the person to whom you're giving your statement. Because the most important thing in starting a case is your very first statement. So now you come and the person behind the desk says, I'm not going to write the statement. It's going to be typed on a computer. And here comes in technology. And you're going to have lawyers, hopefully on a pro bono basis, who experts in this, who are doing pro bono work in the police stations to guide and ensure that the people who are taking the statements from the very outset are doing justice to the statement. And the moment the statement is uploaded, just like we on case lines as lawyers, if you want to access a statement, you have to have permission, because we all know, how do you cause havoc? You cause havoc by interfering with what's in a docket. So if, God forbid, you're coming in to report a sexual offense or something like that, they direct you to another area, a safe area where you feel comfortable and this is the future of law enforcement in the country, but it needs a partnership. And I'm committed to it. I put my hand up. So I hope that everybody else is committed, because it's all well and good for us to sit and complain. But unless we're going to stand up and lock arms together and try and make a difference in every sense, whatever you can do, then we shouldn't be complaining in the first place. So I leave you with that thought, and it made me very proud. You know, Jeremy says he wants his juniors to succeed. Well, Jeremy, as my junior, you made me very proud tonight. Thank you.
You can see we are doing some about nonsense.
Well, on that very positive note, and thank you, Bernard, I think we're going to wrap up unless there are any final questions. Sorry, there is. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Oh, there.
Thank you very much. I must say my question is a tough act to follow after that beautiful comment. My first question really is in relation to cyber insurance. I know that entities that are mostly high risk, such as fintechs and banks and such, have that measure in place. What is the panel's view, or currently, what is the trend for companies that don't view cyber attacks as a high risk? Like an example that was mentioned of the gym, that only upon them having the cyber attack did they realize that actually this is something that we actually need to have mitigation to mitigate. What are the trends in that relation? And then my second question is in relation to payment of ransoms. Are there insurance that cover payment of ransoms in the event of cyber attacks? And if so, what are your views, taking into account that it's quite a contentious thing, payment of ransoms?
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you, Jacques, because we were talking about it earlier, from the bank's perspective, cyber insurance, how that works, and maybe some thoughts. I'm not sure that there are any cyber insurance specialists here, but I'm sure we can get a few views.
We may even get some benefit from some of my colleagues here, but yeah. So I mean, from a Nedbank perspective, we participate as part of our group insurance policy. There's also cyber insurance coverage. It's quite a comprehensive and intense process every year to get that sort of sorted out with the underwriters. They also do a lot of diligence work in terms of making sure that your, like you said, cyber posture, etc., is acceptable for them in order to insure you. In terms of the question as to, does that also include a cover for ransomware payments? Yes, those policies do. The insurers also, for instance, as part of the insurance, normally have access to ransom negotiators as part of the policies, things like that. But I guess that all still depends on whether an organization will make that call to pay ransom or not. And I think the first response everybody will say is you won't pay ransom. I'm sort of still in the space of it depends. As a bank, that is our going in position. We've even gone as far as part of our crisis management processes for cyber. We've got an ethics committee that should we ever be in a position like that ethics committee will be requested to make a recommendation to the group exco. So that's how serious we would take, something like that. Not, just make a call like that, but. I guess it sometimes depends which type of industry you are, what type of situation you are. The unfortunate thing is, as we've heard, that the success rate often of even if you have paid is not necessarily that great.
Yeah. I have seen smaller organizations trade the technology over buying the insurance in the financial industries. We see it on some of our transactions that instead of spending money on very expensive insurance, they try to spend the money on more sophisticated solutions to try to prevent an attack. But I mean, it's not an easy thing to balance when you're a smaller organization. I think when you're a bank, it's you've got access to resources.
Maybe just I think the important thing is the insurance is not only there for a ransom payout.
Yeah.
The insurance is also there if you had to incur costs like getting to hire Jacques to come and do some forensic work or digital work when you have an incident, etc. It's also to cover some of those costs, some of the legal costs. Should you have any clients that put in claims against you, your regulators fine you. It's for all of those things. So it's quite comprehensive in nature.
Look, I think it comes down to a commercial decision. We've had it a lot with our clients where you weigh it up. And particularly with the smaller clients where you say that you want to invest more in the actual infrastructure, there's a lot of products out there that actually guarantee their product. So you will end up getting insurance with their product. And in that regard, it's a much better investment because they've got skin in the game. They're guaranteeing their product. And some of them, there's one particular, I'm not going to mention because I won't be sound to endorsing anyone, that actually gives you ransom payment insurance on top of that, obviously provided you follow certain protocols within their software as part of their program. So, I would rather invest in a particular software that it's in its interest to keep the software running properly and protect you than paying insurance where I've got to make sure I tick boxes so that I'm not repudiate if one of my 100 employees doesn't do their security exercises to a point. And it's again, like T says, it's a commercial decision. You've got to weigh it up, see what gives you more benefit and where the risk and the reward is. And that, from a legal point of view, all we can say is that as long as your infrastructure is adequate, you've got to make the commercial decision as to how you want to approach it.
Right, last question. I think there was somebody waiting patiently, and then we're going to wrap up. Go ahead.
Not a question, it's a comment, and it's also for our advocates in the room, something that they can assist us with, is that the other aspect of cybercrime is from the perspective of the criminal. So where we as the bank, we are fine in terms of our cybersecurity and everything. We do everything we can for our customers to ensure that their money is safe and everything, but the fraudster also has a bank account. So where we get sued in some instances is where a client is a victim of business email compromise, phishing, and these funds are transferred into a bank account maybe held with Nedbank. And as Jacques said, because we are highly regulated, that also opens up room for claimants to have a plethora of reasons or grounds to actually try and get money out of the bank. So whether they'll sue us from, attack us from a FICA perspective, alleging that we failed to, follow due diligence in opening the account, thereby, contravening FICA, or where the funds were reported to have been fraudulent, we failed to follow reasonable grounds to try and recover the funds, whatever the case is. So from a litigation perspective, from a cybercrimes perspective as well, is that we also would require, when we give briefs out, instructions, it in some instances would be where we are being sued because the account that received those funds was a Nedbank account. So it's just another aspect to think about.
Yeah. Well, look, just if I weigh in there, I mean, there was actually a recent SEA authority which dealt with the fact that, because there's always been a bit of muddied waters now, where there was the ENS case that was then overturned in relation to the duty of care and all of that. But this SCA case was quite emphatic, that particularly with compromise now, where effectively they changed the bank account details. This was the case, is that it's the payor's obligation to ensure the details are correct. Okay, so again, yes, whilst people will come after you, can never stop litigators from vexatiously litigating, and particularly going after the banks because they see you with the deepest pockets, because it's not your money, it's everyone else's money. So they feel like it's the easiest target. But at the end of the day, they have to prove their claim. Okay, and your protocols are only obliging you to go so far. You do an STR, you're not obliged to show them an STR. You still have to follow through with the transaction until the FIC tells you otherwise. So you can't say that you didn't breach any duties there. You've got a situation where if you've KYC'd adequately and it's been done appropriately, you have a situation where you've done your job. You can't now just automatically incur liability, notwithstanding the fact that you've also got your limitations in terms of your terms with your consumers. But there was, funnily enough, also interesting, not many people know about this, but a couple of years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago, David Unterholter brought a doctrine into our law called the Norwich Farmer Coal Relief, which it's called the NAMPAC judgment. And the principle that was established, because it's relevant to the banks, is that if there's an ongoing offence, like a theft, and particularly a cyber offence where the payments are diverted, and now you have a situation where you as a bank have received the funds, okay, you have obligations where you cannot disclose that to third parties. You have your duties to your clients. You have confidentiality. There's legislative restrictions. This order allows, as long as the litigant can show that it has a claim, it needs to pursue that claim, and in order to do so, it needs the identity of the individual who it will be intending to institute the whatever process is. They can go ex parte to a court and justify an order compelling you as the bank to provide those details, plus the bank statements, together with the flow of funds. All right? It's an amazing relief. I've used it a few times now, and it's not widely known. And it allows you to actually see the flow of funds lawfully. It allows you to protect the bank, because you have to give certain POPI undertakings as part of the order. Otherwise, you won't get your order. And you're protected. You've done your job. And the person who's affected must go after the people that affected them, the third parties. That's it. But the fact of that is, just because someone's going to sue you, don't automatically think you're liable. It's not always. Your structures are good, particularly in the bigger organizations. You've been doing this for years. You'd be surprised with the international institutions. I mean, Jacques and I, no matter, we were dealing with the DOJ in the US. They couldn't use our secure transfer platforms. It was too advanced for them. We had to go back to an FTP server, all right, which is it's like still using Merck instead of WhatsApp. For those of you that are young, are old enough to understand what Merck was.
You don't know.
But the fact of the matter is that you'd be surprised how amazing our banking security and infrastructures are compared to the rest of the world, and that you mustn't underestimate that.
Okay, so now I'm going to formally and finally invite you to join us for some drinks and cocktails at the bar. And I also want to take the opportunity to really thank each of you for making so much of time and for so enthusiastically participating in this discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, learned a lot of new things, and I hope that all of you in the audience have as well. Thank you very much.